What happens when you need to fight the man? How to unite the many clans? POC, disabled and undocumented aliens, indigenous natives and gays and queers and also trans, alpha, female, beta man. How to get them together stand. All these identitarians will come now, darling, take my hand. I'll lead you to the promised land. All we need are some demands. All right, as promised, I'm going to read through the list of student demands, and as you might suppose, there are a whole lot of them. To begin at the top, we're going to do with the official black demands and work our way through others' demands. We demand that no changes to the student code of conduct be made without democratic student consent. We demand consent as distinct and separate from input in the process of revising the codes that govern us. The coalition of black students and students of color, I don't know how or why those two have been separated, but they're very separated now. The coalition of black students and students of color that are submitting these demands will nominate, listen to this, 5 black students to inhabit a student code of conduct task force by the end of spring quarter 2017. The student code of conduct task force will be an autonomous body from the Office of Student Affairs, will employ a consensus-based decision-making process, and will have ratifying and veto power over all revisions to the student code of conduct. The Office of Student Affairs will submit revisions to the Student Code of Conduct to the task force and will not implement those revisions until the task force gives their written approval. The task force will do no labor other than review changes presented and say yes or no. The students placed on that task force will each be paid a stipend of $500 a quarter until the Student Code of Conduct is approved. So basically they want to take the thing hostage? I don't understand. We demand that no one is charged with a Student Code of Conduct violation until these revisions are finalized. No one is charged for the demonstrations of the past 2 weeks, beginning May 14th. And there has to be something very special about May 14th. I think that has to do with the Kiave run-in with 2 other students, one of which is a resident advisor, or RA, who actually, this resident advisor, who shall not be named, pink hair, is actually on the revision, on the council that's now revising the Student Code of Conduct. And from what I've gathered, and I'll probably do a fuller episode of this in the future, this task force has been met by the supreme difficulty of realizing that all of the Student Code of Conduct is actually based on Washington law. And so in order to manipulate the Code of Conduct, you actually have to understand how it fits into Washington law. I don't know how they're doing. They were very big on transparency, but only had one meeting and are not answering any emails from students who are asking, how's it going on? Which is the funny thing about demanding transparency for this group, because what they really just wanted to have was a seat on the table. Transparency just means that my in-group knows what's happening and I personally have control of what's going on. We demand that Officer Timothy Odell be fired and suspended during the investigation, suspended without pay while an investigation takes place. We demand Officer Odell be fired if he is guilty of using excessive force and aggression when responding to student protesting. Odell started violently pushing through students who were trying to protect black students. The black students told the white students to block the path of the cop. To protect the black students when Timothy Odell was just trying to get into the room that they were all blocking. Odell was asked to stop, and students expressed that they weren't dangerous. They were screaming at him, saying, "Don't speak to him, don't say anything." Odell refused to listen. Odell continued to knock students over in attempt to reach the black students. He wasn't trying to reach the black students. He was trying to get to Brett Weinstein. Odell was targeting people of color. Well, if anything supports your narrative of being targeted, it would be that precise narrative of events, which is directly contradicted by the actual video that the students took of those events.
You don't block me. Out of my way. Out of my way now.
Let's go. I don't mind pushing through.
Wait. Excuse me. So, wait, hold on. Can I get this straight? You were coming over here for Brett Weinstein because you were...
I got information
You
being
thought-
cornered by students.
Oh, okay, but not over here.
Not being cornered.
Okay, maybe you should have gotten better information.
I only get limited information.
Oh, okay,
so
well, we were in D. It's a very small campus.
But I guess that doesn't matter because we're demanding right now. We demand the immediate firing of Andrea Siebert Olson, the assistant to the VP for Student Conduct, from all Evergreen State College positions. We request that no transfer happen, but a complete removal. Siebert Olson has shown a consistent, often violent flaw in judgment when it pertains to the needs and safety of capitalized black students, other students of color, capitalized T trans students, students with disabilities, students who have experienced sexual assault. Siebert Olson has been given an ample amount of time to educate herself about the needs of more marginalized students and has failed to show evidence of effort or effectiveness. Now, side note, these people are pretty young. They're in the middle of their college education and they're demanding that other people be educated about the needs of this and that group. So I'm kind of suspicious that they themselves are even educated with regards to this stuff. But I'm sure that they've been educated to think that they are educated, which I think they mention later on or in another document. To continue, we believe that at this point, there is no way for Andrea Siebert Olson to redeem herself as her reputation directly influences her ability to do her job. The students who are in the most danger in the current climate that the students created and culture of both the Evergreen campus and the United States, which the students didn't create, do not view Siebert Olson as a safe person to seek help from. Now, I would dearly love to speak with Andrea Siebert Olson. So far as I know, she's still employed at the college, and so I doubt that she'd want to actually speak with me. But I did meet with her with regards to a certain case where certain protesters that I witnessed myself stepped way out of line and basically assaulted administration of Evergreen while they were protesting on the very day of Officer Brown's signing in, which is another story. But I'd like to talk to Siebert Olson to see exactly why the students loathe her so much. It might be that she's the one who's in charge of processing the student conduct code. And so since these people want the student conduct code to be changed and all charges dropped, she is probably somebody that they see as in their way and is assaulting and targeting them by specifying exactly how they have violated certain codes of conduct and assigning them punishment or being involved in the process to do so. That's just speculation on my point. They don't say why, other than these very hippy-dippy accusations of her inability to do her job, her violent nature, and the feeling of certain students that she is unsafe. To continue, We demand no expansion of police facilities or services at any point in the future. We demand that police services sell all of their lethal and less than lethal weapons and donate the money to manifestation of demands enumerated here. This demand entails that at no point in the planning stages of any expansion of campus facilities should plans be articulated or students, staff, administrators, faculty, or contractors be paid to work on plans to provide increased office space, increased surveillance technology, or more, or expanded holding cells to police services. We demand for the institution to create a student collective to develop and implement alternative policing. They're operating under the assumption that police are inherently dangerous to them. And I think that that is part of the Black Lives Matter narrative about police constantly assaulting black students. Now, there is this very inaccurate statistic that Naima Lowe herself has promulgated that
We are among the black people who are killed every 28 minutes by a cop or some fool who thinks he can be.
However, the calculation that I've heard is every 24 hours or 28 hours or something like that. But anyways, the narrative is that black people are under constant assault by police services, so that they want all the police to go away and to erect their own mode of feeling safe for themselves. So what I see happening, this is just a subjective kind of viewpoint in this list of demands here, is that they want the control to enforce what they think is safe. And at the same time, they're acting in very unsafe manners. They are cordoning people off. They are blocking entrances and exits. They don't really have an education of how to keep people safe. They're not even well trained on how to swing a bat, let alone who to swing a bat at. Presumably you swing a bat at a Nazi, but since we've seen that everybody's a Nazi, according to them, who doesn't sign up for this stuff, then they're just going to go willy-nilly wielding bats and bashing people over the head like a Little Bunny Foo-Foo episode. So they constantly say that they don't feel safe, and they want to extinguish all the apparatus that keeps people safe in a general sense. And I don't think they understand that reform doesn't work that way, or they don't want to deal with reform. And I think that they've been taught this. I think they've been taught this by their culture, not specifically black culture or anything like that, but just by the culture of activism itself and by certain proponents within Evergreen who are very anti-cop, such as Naima Lowe, who in a Facebook post that I might post right now has asked for the burning down of so-called cop shops. So, there is connections between Naima Lowe and certain of these protesters. So, there's this vein of anti-police sentiment and this constant appeal to not feeling safe. To go forward. We demand mandatory sensitivity and cultural competency training for faculty, staff, administrators, and student employees. Hire Aorta Collective or a comparable anti-oppression training collective to develop a plan for mandatory training for all faculty, staff, and student employees. We demand anonymous evaluation forms for students to evaluate all faculty. We demand the creation of an equity center in the 4th floor of the library building. We demand a remodel that will accommodate students and have movable walls for caucusing spaces. Now, the thing is that I've seen with what Evergreen calls caucusing, and this is probably something that just happens in a political environment, but caucusing to them means that everybody separates according to their own racial group and talks amongst themselves, and then I'll come back. And that's what's happened with all these demands. So all these different identity groups have separated off and formulated their own demands and then come back. And they want an equity center where caucusing can occur constantly, which I think is a form of segregation, at least in the moment, but I think while we go through and see that all these different groups are operating on their own to come together, to band together into this intersectional demand mob, there's an inherent mode of segregating people based on their identity groups. And that's operative in this stuff. So this equity center must be fully staffed and must have an assistant director, innovative program coordinator, case manager, and student advisor. We demand that equity center have its own budget and be connected to the new VP/VP for equity and inclusion. Now, this is the first time that they start to really make monetary demands on things. I mean, there's the $500 a week for the 5 black people that we're going to rewrite or hold the code of conduct hostage until they say either yes or no to it. But now they're starting to do some seriously monetary demands. They want to fully staff this equity center. They want to build their own house and have their own people to rule that house, and so on and so forth. And this is an interesting thing about these demands, and they get more and more expensive as these demands go on, that the students don't really understand how money works. They don't understand how that will actually increase tuition, which will make it harder for the marginalized groups that are underfunded themselves to actually gain entry. And then you're going to need to have like a whole new system of scholarships and raise a whole bunch more money to afford all this other stuff. They just think it'll appear out of nowhere if you demand enough. Or I guess that's kind of their hope. We demand for the coordinator of the Trans and Queer Center to be permanently hired full-time. Currently, they are temporarily hired and their contract ends in June. I think George did acquiesce to this demand. We demand the creation of a permanent position that will support undocumented students. This position will have a budget that will create scholarships, housing, and protections. We demand that the video created for Day of Absence and Day of Presence that was stolen by white supremacists and edited to expose and ridicule the students and staff be taken down by the administration this Friday. So they want to storm the internet and create like this reverse Streisand effect when they don't really understand how the Streisand effect works. So in direct proportion to how much you don't want the internet to look at something, the internet will look at that thing. And that's actually, I wish I could capitalize on that myself. I think there's a lot of creatives, content creators, who just think like, well, what if I make out that I don't want people to look at me? Don't look at me, don't look at me, don't look at me. Maybe I'll get all that attention, but you really, really, really have to not want people to look at you in order for your Streisand to have an effect. And with regards to their Streisand, nobody really knows what video they're talking about. And because everybody's a white supremacist, we can't even figure out exactly which white supremacist edited it. If we knew which white supremacist they were talking about, we could go say, okay, that's the video that they're talking about. But we don't know. So their Streisand's just effectively disineffectual. Okay, we demand Brett Weinstein be suspended immediately without pay, but all students receive full credit. And I went into that whole demanding for credit and how I find that rather offensive to what I think education is all about. I think that this demand is a great opportunity for them to be educated about what is practical, but I think that with regards to what a demand is and why it's so popular right now, there's a link that I put in the description that goes through and talks about how all these different student groups across the nation are demanding. And if you think about it, what is a demand? What is a demand? I think that we can understand it as like an angry lottery ticket. Right. So when all of us, statistically all of us, go and buy a lottery ticket, what we're actually purchasing isn't the chance to win money so much as the opportunity to dream of spending money, right? So when we purchase a lottery ticket, we're buying a dream. We're buying like half an hour or 20 minutes or a night of thinking of what I could do with all this money, right? So a demand is just an angry lottery ticket. And what they're purchasing right now is the declaration of this utopic existence, or what they think that they need in order for utopia to occur. Not to say that utopia in itself is wrong, but if you are not coupled with reality, if your dream of reality isn't coupled to reality, then there's no way for you to actually get those two things to collide unless you just completely bank on lightning to occur, which, you know, we all do that when we buy a lottery ticket, so you might as well just demand everything. So when we go through and we look at these demands, I think that it's you know, the compulsion is to kind of say this is ridiculous. But the thing is that of course it is ridiculous. It is by its very nature going to get more and more ridiculous because they're not asking what is possible. They're not training themselves on what is possible. And I wonder if any teacher or administration has taken this as the opportunity to help them try to figure out how what is possible and what is desired need to link up with what is some sort of actionable process. But I guess we all kind of just learn this as a matter of course. We demand an official statement on each of these demands from George Bridges that is divided up into 10 sections on this Friday, May 26th, 2017. As Latinx students of the Evergreen State College, MEXA and Familia demands that all the demands of the Black, Native, Pacific Islander, and trans community be met. There will be a hiring increase of Latinx faculty and staff in all fields of study. There will be a hiring increase of people of color, primarily in the math and sciences. There will be a hiring of an admissions position in which they are culturally competent in Latinx issues, competent in trans identity and gender and sexual identity in the context of Latinx communities, monolingual or bilingual in Spanish, competent in admissions and financial aid process for undocumented students. There will be a commitment of funding for the retention program. Latinx students will have the options of taking Spanish classes for free to provide reparation for forced assimilation and erasure of our language. Now, I do not want to piss off any Latinx people. Right? I want to proceed very gingerly with arguing this point, but Latinx students will have the options of taking Spanish classes for free to provide reparation for forced assimilation and erasure of our language. Now, the problem that I have with that is that if their parents migrated to the United States, you can't complain about forced assimilation. I'm not some make America great again dude, though there is a picture of me wearing that hat. Ironically, I might add, just because I thought it would be funny to try to show up to Evergreen with that hat on and see how long I lasted, but I didn't. I wimped out. But if you are going to enter into a country such as the United States, I mean, there's a benefit to being in the United States, and there's a cost to that benefit. And the cost of the benefits that are in the United States is assimilation into that culture. I think that their assimilation is not forced on them by that culture, but by a process of fitting into that culture. To go into somebody's house, right? Whether or not you invited in, let's say people invite you into their house. I mean, like, common courtesy is to adapt your behavior to the house rules. Now, I'm not saying that all America is perfect, great, and we can't do any sort of reformation, but to kind of demand that your language is being erased in order to survive in a new place, I think it's kind of foolhardy. And I think it's another opportunity for people to kind of figure out how practically life works. To continue. There will be more courses that are centered around Latinx students and history, including media created by Latinx artists. Patrol cars will be removed from the library to Health Services walkway. So the Health Services building is right next to the Police Services building, and all these groups hate the police, and so they want the police to disappear. There will be, this one's really difficult. There will be a removal of American flag. This is a state school. Again, if you want to go to a country, or if you were brought to a country by your parents, you don't start demanding that the country change according to you. You don't start slandering the country, because actually this Evergreen State College was built by the resources generated by Washington State and by federal funding too. And whether or not that was entirely 100% just, there was a lot of effort that a lot of people calling themselves American and acting under the banner of America, put into this to provide you with education. And if you want them to be generous with you, you don't go out and slander the people that you're asking for help, that you're demanding. I don't think that you need to add insult to angry. We demand that the campus establishes a zero-tolerance policy regarding racism and hate crimes among students, staff, and faculty. Now, see, here's the problem again. Zero tolerance. Now, theoretically, that's great. We are not going to tolerate hate. Like, as a preschool teacher, I do not tolerate hitting. But how do I have a zero-tolerance policy on that? As soon as a kid hits, I hit them, or I relegate them to the sandlot, or I just kick them out of class. I have their parents come and pick them up. Like, zero tolerance also comes with this whole thing about how do you prosecute somebody. They're angry at Andrea Supert Olsen, who's human, is probably flawed, right? But anybody who has the authority to have zero tolerance is a de facto tyrant. You're asking for Stalin. Now you want your Stalin to be there, but you're still asking for a Stalin. That's what this zero tolerance policy is all about. And furthermore, the administration's being extremely lenient with the violations of the student code of conduct, right? So if there was a zero tolerance policy for any violation of the student code of conduct, then everybody would be out on their asses by this point. So, like they want to be able to demand zero tolerance, but at the same time, completely take advantage of the extension of tolerance to them, which is a problem. And this is learning. I don't think we should denigrate these students. I think that they're young and they need to be educated. And I hope that this is an educational experience. There will be more institutional support for Latinx students in undergraduate studies. The college will reach out to local and statewide Latinx organizations to create opportunities for our community. So they want the college to do all this stuff. It seems like this is work that they should be doing. The college will pay for more Latinx artists, presenters, speakers, and musicians for events and programs. MEXA and other racial and ethnic identity groups get funding through SNA without the institutional oversight of the SA board. So students and activities. So they want carte blanche, right? They want a blank check from the student board, no oversight, right? So they want zero tolerance, no oversight. This is a tyrannical document. If this were to be implemented, I mean, it's not going to pass any sort of legal muster. And I don't know if they're self-reflexive enough to see that when you're demanding what you're doing, right? So to go back to demands, when we act out our fantasies, when we allow ourselves to dream of having all this power, right? And then we start exercising that power through speech in this instance. They're exercising their imagined power through speech, and that speech, insofar as it is an action or a dream, is the projection of a character. And if you look at the character that they're projecting, it's a very tyrannical, totalitarian character. And I think that itself should be viewed and critiqued, and then see, well, at what point do we actually try to get along with everybody else and stop demanding? But we're just in full demand mode. Ooh, okay, here we go. Free, secure, and discreet housing and free parking for undocumented students to prevent racial profiling from state, federal, and local police during commuting. Now, I think that I would be remiss to leave unmentioned that when President Trump gathered his forces and then won the presidency, he kind of demonized the Latin community. And so I think that there is some trauma, some reflexive trauma at work in this document, and also in the events at Evergreen in general, is basically a reaction to Trump, or to their image of what Trump was. And so this whole racial profiling from state and federal agencies is, of course, coming from the fact that Trump has commanded that all these people be rounded up, or whatnot, to whatever degree he's actually done that. They continue. Divestment of all Israeli products and corporations. Divestment from corporations that support private prisons, including Aramark, Sabra, Caterpillar, and Bank of America. Now, to go back to the Israeli thing, Evergreen is rather anti-Semitic in the sense of anti-Israel. And I might end up trying to get into that, but I don't really want to touch that thing. But if you go back to 2003, 2004, there was this young woman Rachel Corrie, who was taught that Palestine is righteous and Israel's evil, and she went over to Israel and she stood in front of a tractor to protect some Palestinian housing. I don't have my facts right. Anyway, she was run over by a tractor, and that had a very strong impact on Evergreen. And since that point, it has been one seminar after another about how Israel's bad and Palestine's good, over and over and over again. So I think that the students are sponging up this anti-Israeli demand. To continue, creation of a Latinx center, including a paid permanent coordinator position and work-study position to run that center. So they want their own room. Okay, and then they want a creation of a multicultural center. So they want another room. They want mandatory staff and faculty trainings on how to support undocumented students. I mean, okay, the other thing, okay, so there's all this money, but also there's so much time. I mean, you want your professor to be proficient enough in how to teach their profession, but if you overload that professor with all this stuff that doesn't have to do with science or math or technology or English or poetry or whatever, with all these other demands that they have to do, at what point does that teacher get to actually forward that mode of study? And at what point do people actually get to go to that teacher and actually learn, right? So this is not about learning. This is about getting. College in this set of demands is a place that you go where you get satisfied, where the reparations of all the difficulties of your life and all of history are gratified for the 4 years. You go there and you pay the price, you take all these loans, and you get there and you are served. And when you get out of there, then you have the experience of what it would be like, I guess, to be in utopia. But at the same time, I think that that's not what college is at all. Learning is acquired in direct proportion to how much effort you put into it. So maybe they're learning, this is an educational experience, and I understand that, but to demand all this stuff from a college that doesn't really have to do with learning is actually anti-college and is really difficult. And in the end, it might not serve these young people to get an education if they're just being constantly catered to or being able to demand all these things about equity or call out their teachers for being unequitable, this and this and this and this and this, which doesn't have to do with like actually studying the material and the context. Now, not to say that teachers shouldn't be able to treat people humanely. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that, how do you go about helping teachers to be more human with regards to other students? How do you get students to be more human with regards to other students and to teachers and staff and faculty? That's a question. I guess so there is room for training for all of us, but if that is the sole mode, if that is the sole goal of an educational institution, it's not an educational institution. It's an institution of utopia, which is fine if that's what you want. Okay, provide free sanitary and safe sex supplies in all bathrooms. They want condoms and tampons all over the place. Demilitarize police through the removal of all lethal and non-lethal weapons. Honesty and transparency with prospective students about the anti-blackness, racism, transphobia, homophobia, and ableism on this campus. Now, I have to ask somebody, I'm honestly asking, what is the difference between racism and anti-blackness? Is anti-blackness a special form of racism or something completely different? I would like to know that, if anybody knows. To continue, more faculty of color will be hired who are willing to take anti-bias training, specifically in the sciences, immediately. They don't really understand that it does take time to hire people. And furthermore, if you want good scientists, I mean, you're going to weed out a lot of scientists by saying, okay, well, we want you to teach science because you're an awesome teacher, but we want you to take all this anti-bias stuff and speak in our language and think in our way, which is actually, I brought that up with the teachers' lists of demands or their solid letter of solidarity with all these other demands. Yeah, so the letter of solidarity is supporting all these demands. Remember that. So all the teachers that signed that letter specifically signed on to all these demands, okay? So we can't forget that they've signed up. So they have the backing of the authority figures. And so I guess they want more teachers who will sign up for this stuff. I guess that's what they're wanting immediately. A larger space for the Unity Lounge and Trans Queer and Center and the Trans and Queer Center, as well as more funding. So they want another room and more money. An establishment of a 24-hour food bank moved away from police services and wellness services. So the police have set up this food bank to be, more communal with their community, but, the police are anti-community, so they want the food bank somewhere else. So they want free food, more rooms, more money, free food. Teachers who will do our bidding. There will be reduced parking permits and fines for low-income students. I wouldn't mind that. There will be more support in finding privately funded scholarships for undocumented students, so they want somebody to spend more time finding more money for them. The administration will provide financial support and funding, our ability to provide EMT and crisis management training to a community response team. This team should be paid by the college and chosen by the students. How can you trust these students to know who to hire? I mean, they don't have enough life experience to make a practical list of demands, let alone hire people who are able to fulfill all these parameters that they want. Removal of all disruptions, protests off the student conduct code as a violation. One cannot claim they support protests but are anti-disruption when it comes down to their own interests, such as, learning. The creation of a new diversity and inclusion graduation requirement, which will primarily focus on any U.S.-centric structural oppression, such as race, gender, sexuality, and so on. So they want to really batten down with this anti-American education. They want everybody to know by the time you graduate from Evergreen how awful America is while you're sitting at this publicly funded college, like experiencing all these other wonderful things. Like, this is so privileged. I wonder if that is this incendiary? Is all these statements actually incendiary that I'm calling these people out on this? That's interesting. I know that a lot of people who are going to watch this video are going to say, yeah, well, look at that. I agree, or whatever. But I'm sure that there are people who think that I'm a white nationalist or white supremacist for pointing out the flaws in this logic, which I want to point out the flaws in that logic. I want to point out the flaws in the logic that says that anybody who disagrees with you is your enemy. Because that this allows you to be able to learn from this demand. When somebody says that you're ridiculous, maybe they're not telling you that out of hate. Maybe they're telling you that out of love. And I'm not saying that I'm doing it out of love, but there's a possibility that ridicule actually comes from love too, as a way to, help that person out. Pre-orientation programs specifically centered on resources for people of color. Transparent discipline processes for faculty and staff. That's iffy. After-hours wellness services for students that work. So they want more things. Assistance and financial aid processes for students who need it. And then they define Latinx. Noun, North American. A person of Latin American origin or descent, used as a gender-neutral or non-binary alternative to Latino or Latina. Now, to piss off more people, or not, because actually these are my favorite demands. These are my favorite demands. These are the native demands. Demands. Copy-pasted. Expose Evergreen. Hashtag. This is the native students' list of demands for the Evergreen State College that were discussed at our native caucus. Native demands. That all the demands of the Black and trans community be addressed and met. See, the natives are great. They put everybody up first. I truly, honestly love the natives, and whenever I was able to work with them was a great moment for me. They're very peaceful, honest, loving people. I could feel their connection, their connectivity, I guess. So, that the Evergreen State College demilitarize and disarm campus police in favor of campus security force that is overseen by a student, faculty, and staff review board, that every public announcement of the Evergreen State College begins with an acknowledgement of the indigenous people of the Medicine Creek Treaty, whose land was stolen to establish the college, that additional funding and resources be allocated to the recruitment and retainment of self-identified Native American undergraduate and graduate students, that the Native Student Alliance administration be transitioned to paid positions by the beginning of fall quarter 2017, that funding and space be provided for the establishment of a multicultural center for all marginalized communities, that the campus establishes a zero-tolerance policy regarding racism and hate crimes among students, staff, and faculty, that the Evergreen State College will recruit and hire at least one Native faculty on the tenure track each hiring season. That's quite a demand. That the Evergreen State College fully fund a 3-day pre-orientation retreat of the Native community's choice for incoming Native American students, so they may build community and solidarity prior to the official start of the academic year, another expensive demand. That the Evergreen State College fully fund a separate Native American graduation, that the Native American students, staff, and faculty be exempted from the catering and cooking prohibitions of the Aramark food contract, so within the Longhouse, which is a very beautiful building, they can cook, cater, and eat in freedom, regardless of an event qualifying as a potluck or not. That Native American students, staff, and faculty can sustainably collect, gather, and harvest the natural resources from any of the Evergreen State College lands for ceremonial purposes with legal impunity and asking no permission. Another heart, Black and Native solidarity. So basically, they're up for what everybody else wants. They want to be able to plant and grow things on Evergreen State College, which was originally owned by this Native Creek Treaty, and they want to be able to eat their own food and not have to deal with the shitty Aramark food. I mean, this is the humblest demand you'll ever find. Now, the opposite of the humblest demand you'll ever find is the rad demands. And I get to completely take my gloves off on these people because these are the resident assistants. And the resident assistants, now they're the people who work in the dorms. They're usually students, mostly students. They work in the dorms and they are supposed to provide help for other students. They not protested, but they went on a strike during all the protests, and one of the RA demands we know who he is, and they shall not be named, pink hair, is on this committee. So I think you might be able to see some of the same vocabulary. Anyway, so these are paid positions from students, but they're still paid positions. Resident Assistants Fighting for Tomorrow. Their acronym is RAFT. Similar to a canoe, I guess. The collective demands of the resident assistants for the administration of residential and dining services. Good God, this is such a long episode. Demands. Affiliations with police services. RAD services will limit our affiliations with police services in the following ways. Police officers will no longer sit with any RAD services employee on campus eating establishments. Whoa. Nor will any RD sit with the RAs unless asked. Wow. Police officers will not attend RA-sponsored events without an explicit invitation from all RAs involved. Police officers will no longer accompany RAs on rounds without explicit consent from all on-duty staff. RAs will also reserve the right to dismiss officers during conduct confrontations at any point, without question, except as required by state or federal law. Because the RA staff will inevitably be required to continue working with police services in some capacity, the police officers will undergo more consistent social justice-based training. RAs will also be provided with specific information on what the officers have been trained on for accountability purposes. Accountability process. RAD services will implement an accountability process for interactions between both RDs and RAs, as well as within the RA staff itself. There will be consistent opportunities to provide constructive feedback for both RDs and RAs. Feedback will be provided in written form each quarter or when explicitly asked for by either party. RDs, resident directors, will allow for RAs, resident assistants, to pick up another RA's duty shift when necessary without necessitating a duty switch. This will be done without questions as to why an RA needs to drop a shift. These guys are so bastards. RAs will devise their own accountability process for this new policy. The RDs will provide spaces for RAs to privately hold one another accountable during an in-services or a bi-weekly 20-minute basis. Oh geez, so basically they want a torture chamber to whip each other or hold each other accountable. Okay, student wellness services support. RAD services will create a system that offers student wellness services directly to residents living in on-campus housing. Counseling offices will be added to lower campus or to better meet the needs of our housing community. That includes weekends. 24/7 services that support residents after business hours and on the weekends that are not the RD on call will be provided. They want services to support residents after business hours. I guess a vending machine, a water fountain, I don't know. This will be an additional position added to the Res Life Pro staff. RAs will be involved in the hiring process for this position. Okay, so they want an extra person on duty that can unlock certain doors, I guess. If 911 is called and Evergreen police respond, RAD staff on site will have the prerogative to decide whether or not it is appropriate for police to enter the space, except as required by state or federal law. Like, these guys have no notion of reality whatsoever. These guys are totally off the deep end. Totally off the deep end. Student wellness services will become more accessible to RAs, especially in regards to counseling services and other mental health care. Additional fees charged to RA student accounts will be covered by RAD services and will not come out of RA compensation. So I guess late fines and stuff like that. Compensation. Okay, here we go. The RA contract will be charged to more accurately reflect the specific work we as RAs are expected to do on a weekly basis, including on-duty hours, weekly reports, one-on-ones, in-service trainings, etc. RAs for the 2017-2018 school year will be asked to re-sign new contracts. The RA contract will explicitly describe what other duties as assigned includes and what limits exist on this provision. That seems kind of reasonable. The structure for this compensation will be outlined in the contract. RAD administration. RAD services will critically examine the current positions of employees in Res Life. The following professional staff will be held accountable for actions transcribed in the section entitled Complaints Against Res Life Professional Staff. We demand a specific action plan on how these people will be held accountable. The RAD hiring process will include the voices of all RAD employees in some form, prioritizing the voices of people of color and those most multiply marginalized within the hiring community. I can tell exactly who wants the most power in that sentence. Specifically, RAs will become more involved in the RD hiring process. More than one RA of multiple marginalities, with at least one of 3 RAs being a person of color, will be on the hiring process for conduct officers. All RAD employees will undergo social justice training, specifically on issues of race and gender, throughout the course of the academic year by outside organizations. Caucusing and affinity groups will be maintained throughout this process. So just consistent segregation. The RDs will be expected to maintain professionalism at all times in work environments, and clear boundaries will be established between RAs and RDs. Don't touch my cornflakes. RA responsibilities. These people, we're almost done, guys. This is the longest episode ever. I mean, this is how many demands there are. These demands should exhaust you. If you lasted this long, you should get a special demand flare on your any demand post that you make in the future. You've submitted yourself to demands. Okay. RA responsibilities. RAs will have more autonomy within certain aspects of this role. RAs will be recognized as students first, and the RA role will not impede on our academic responsibilities. RAs will no longer be asked to alter class schedules to accommodate the RA duty scheduling process. One-on-ones will be optional, and with the RD of the RA's choice, according to with whom they feel the most comfortable interacting. The RAs will no longer complete the required 5 to 7 p.m. desk shift when on duty. The RAD front office will close at 5 p.m. on Monday through Friday. So they want to do less work, but be given more benefits, basically. This will not be replaced with other duties. The engagement model will be removed in order to allow more freedom for RAs when programming within their specific communities. I don't know what this engagement model is. I'm already suspicious of it, but they don't even like it. So I'm sure that it's even more reasonable, though I'm pretty sure it's not that reasonable. But who knows? I don't know. If RAs are required to submit PRFs at least 7 days in advance, The RDs will be expected to approve said PRFs at least 7 days in advance as well. I guess paid times off, paid leave. Additionally, if a program does not require monetary funds, the PRF needs to be submitted at least 2 days in advance. I don't know what a PRF is. White folks, FOLX, white folks, FOLX, will no longer have the privileges that are denied to people of color. What does that mean? Do white folks have privileges like that the college gives that other people don't? Or are they just talking like just in general? Is this like the end game of white privilege? That basically these people of color want all the things that the white folk have. What exactly are they talking about? That's just thrown in there. Then they go on. RAs will have access to the duty calendar, as though we would not even notice that. They just keep on going. I'm going to repeat that. White folks will no longer have the privileges that are denied to people of color. You need to be more specific than that. And that's a terrifying thing because they don't want to be specific about that. RAs will have access to the duty calendar at least a week prior to each academic quarter. All duty calendars will be updated immediately after changes are approved. Changes will be approved or denied within 24 hours of an email being sent. RAs will no longer be required to do work for the greener organization. Additional work will be optional and compensated appropriately. RAs will have a private space in which to engage in self-care. So they want a place so they can hold people accountable and then a place to relax afterwards, I guess. I don't know. So the cat of nine tails and then a little bit of bonbons afterwards. It will be acceptable to not complete all duties on time when caring for one's mental health. Excuses, excuses, excuses. This is what these people need to learn is about a professional existence. And actually, so they were denied these demands, and people did get fired. I think, so far as I know, I'm waiting for a records request. But so far as I know, the RAs met with the higher ups, and the higher ups is like, we're not going to meet these demands, and you can either quit or be fired or get back to work. All right, at the end of the strike. And so 2 people got fired or quit, and then the rest got to work. Anyways, a protocol will be developed during discussions between RAs and pro staff. Training. RAs will have, say, an autonomy over the training process during the summer and throughout this year. Training around race, class, gender, disability, etc. will be included. Previous trainings will be utilized and reemphasized throughout the course of the academic year. And that's all I have for you guys. I'm going to cut this short of 1 hour, but this is the Evergreen demands. And there's a lot of them. And there's a lot to make fun of, but at the same time, this is a trend that's going on in higher education. We can make fun of these people specifically, or we can make fun of college students specifically, but I think that there's some underlying processes about why people are making demands right now, and why that they think that this is legitimate. I don't have all those answers to try to say, well, when you start making demands, what are you really exhibiting? You're projecting your own character, not only what you want, but what you want to be, and so that's kind of troubling when you see people just like unfettered with rage. They become tyrants, you know. Not to say that there aren't parts of this that aren't good, that can't go forward, but because it's so decoupled from reality, it just becomes more and more ridiculous that you can't actually have a conversation about these things. And I guess I'll link in the comments the response that George made to the first set of demands. He didn't go through and so far as I know, I don't know how much he went through and met with all of the different demands, but certain people got what they wanted and a lot of people didn't. All right, bye.